and welcome to your embroidery beading kit by me. So this kit has been designed by me, made by me, and it's all about giving a go at some 3D beaded embroidery and also some embroidery stitches in there as well. So I've made this video just to give you a real helping hand with it all, so you can really get going on the stitches. So I'll be talking you through the different techniques I use and how to create something a little bit like this one, or even looking at creating something very different, a kind of a pattern, or even again, very different, the floral design. So just talking you through the different stitches, different techniques, just to show you what to do and to get you going on your kit. So thank you for watching. So I'll be working with you today on the orange kit. So it's got orange beads along with pink, turquoise and gold beads in there as well. I've set up my beading mat here with a few beads on there to start with. And then I'll be setting up my thread, my needle with my thread. So this is your beading thread here. You've also got your embroidery threads here. So these two, the orange and turquoise, are your embroidery threads. And then you've got a chunkier one, which is your pink yarn. And then a finer one, which is your beading thread. So that'll be used to thread on all the beads. So I'll thread that up. And then your needles as well. So you've got a longer, really bendy needle. This one is very clever. It splits down the middle. So it's super easy to thread because bead needles can be notoriously difficult to thread with their very tiny eyes. So this just really helps if you really struggle with that, and it's sharp at both ends, so it goes through the fabric. And then you've also got your bead needle there, which is a shorter needle, but it has got that tiny hole, so it can be quite tricky to thread. So you've got options for whichever one you fancy. So I will set that up. I'm also going to be working in a hoop stand today. So I'll show you this. So I have these available on my website. They're very nifty, very handy. So your hoop gets clamped just in the top here. This funny bit here goes underneath your leg, just like so. Squeeze that in, and then you clamp your fabric just in here. So I can show you that now. So your hoop gets clamped in there. I tend to clamp on this part of the hoop just because there's more for it to grip onto. And then you just simply tighten the screw at the top, and then that clamps your fabric in. So I'll be working one of these today. I would highly recommend if you're going to be doing some more beaded embroidery, because it just helps you having both hands free. You then don't have to hold on to the hoop at all, which is really nice. So yeah, these are available on my website to purchase if you would like one. So let's get cracking on some embroidery. Okay, so 2 pointers when you're doing your beaded embroidery. You always want to work with a double thread. So just simply put the thread through the needle and then do a double knot at the end of the thread. So you just always want it 2 strands thickness, just to really help secure those beads on. And then when you start stitching, so I'm going to start beading just here. So I'm going to pull my thread up, and then I'm just going to do a little stitch, just the tiniest, about 1 millimeter or so, and then come up just next to it. And then that just really helps to secure my thread now. Because we're working on linen, the weave is quite open and sometimes the knots can come through. So just by doing that little stitch helps to secure it on. So the first technique I'm going to show you is super simple. I'll show you on the finalized hoop. So just going to show you how to lay down some beads. So for example, here, here, and then those cream ones there, and those copper. So just laying them down, very, very easy. So I'm going to pick up this pinky bead that's frosted and then a bit metallic and iridescent, and I'm just going to place it on my thread, push it all the way to the bottom, lay it down just like so, so I see where it comes out, and then put my needle down where it lies. Super, super easy, just coming up. So it's essentially like a little seed stitch, I suppose, but with a bead on. So thread your bead on, lay that down, and then go back down just next to where it falls. And then I will create a little cluster here of those. Okay, so I've just done this little cluster here, you can see. So I've just laid the beads down one by one next to each other, so that is there. And then I'm going to do a bead and a sequin on top of each other. So I'm just going to go right next to it, and then I'm going to grab out one of my turquoise beads, lay that there, and then let's go for a little orange one on top. The bead mat is super handy because it just stops the beads from rolling everywhere. So I highly recommend using your beading mat while you work. Okay, so for the bead and beads, so I'll show you what it looks like quickly. So just like this cream and copper there, and then we've got a cream and pink, the pink, and cream there. So they look very different with the different beads that you use, which is quite fun to play with as you work through the kit. So I'm selecting the big bead. So I've chosen the big turquoise one and then the little orange one, and I've just threaded them on one after the other, and then I'll push them all the way down to the bottom of my needle, and then I'm going to go back with my needle, but only going through the turquoise bead. So I'm leaving that orange bead off. I'm not going to touch him, but I'm just going back through that turquoise bead, and that helps to anchor it down. And there you go, you've got one stitched in just there. So I'll go do that again. So one big turquoise, one little orange, put your needle back down, thread through the turquoise, and there you go. So I'll work again and do a little cluster of these, and then I will be on to show you the next stitch. Okay, so I've just done that little cluster of the bead and sequins on top of beads and beads on top of each other, sorry, and we're just about to move on to the sequins. So I'm going to grab some of my sequins, I'm just going to lay them on my hoop just here because it's easier to show you, and then I'm just picking beads that I want to go in the middle of the sequin. So it's going to look a bit like this. It's quite different because these are iridescent sequins, whereas these are matte, but it will have a similar feel to this. So it's just kind of, I call them sequin caterpillars. I'm sure that probably isn't what they should be called, but that's the name I've christened them with, so we're going with it. So it is just kind of bead sequin alternating, and they're little caterpillars lying down like so. And they're just really nice. They give a bit of texture and a bit of shape. They look really lovely iridescent, but equally as lovely with the matte sequins too. So you just want to select your sequin. In this kit, you could also use the tiny gold ones as well. You don't have to use the turquoise ones. And then you just want to choose a bead to go in the middle. So I'm just going with the pale pink, but you can choose whichever you fancy. So first of all, just grab out the little seed bead. So I'm just going to pop that on, and then a sequin, and then a bead, a sequin, and a bead. So on my needle, I've got 3 beads and 2 sequins. I'm going to push that all the way to the end of my needle, thread, sorry, up against the end of the thread, and then lay it down. I'm going to put my needle down exactly where that finishes, and then I will just pull that through. So let's do that again. So bead, sequin, bead, sequin, bead. So you want, 3 and 2. You can vary the length of them as you go, but this I find works the best, this length. And then push that all the way down to the end of your thread. Lay them down whichever direction you want to go. You can go this way, this way. I tend to do them kind of alternating directions, so it has that quite organic feel to it. But whichever way you want to lay them, and then pop your needle down where they fall, and then secure that in there. And then I will carry on with this and make a little cluster to show you. So I've just set up a brand new thread to work on. So again, just double threaded, just because I'd run out of thread for the next part. When you finish off your thread, I just tend to go through the back quite a bit. So do probably 4 to 5 stitches on the back, just underneath. I can do it without even looking. But you just simply want to, flip your hoop stand round, so then you can work underneath. And then you just kind of want to glide your needle through 3 or 4 times and make sure it's just underneath that beading work, just so you don't see it coming through to the front. That's the best, but also your thread is matched to the fabric, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue if it does, and you can always cover it with some more beads. But just make sure it's really secure as you finish your thread. So going through 4 to 5 times, doing some stitches, and then trim your thread off at the end, leaving quite like a couple of inches of a tail just to give it that leeway. So now I've done my sequins, I'm going to go on to show you some of the bugles. So I've selected my bugle beads out. So these ones here are your bugle beads. So they're the long skinny ones, and they're really fun for doing some more of the 3D beading. So like these here, those and those. So it's really good at adding some texture. So let's work on those. So I'm going to pop my needle through again, do a little stitch, one in, there we go. So now we're nice and secure, ready to go. Just grab one of those bugles, slide that on, and then I'm going to put a turquoise bead on top, slide that on, push that to the end of your thread, and then with your needle go back through the bugle bead, leaving that turquoise bead out. So very similar to how we did these, but it's just with the bugle bead instead. And then there you go, he's standing upright. And let's do another one. So bugle bead and then seed bead on top. Pop your needle back through the bugle bead, holding onto the seed bead is how I tend to do it, and then pull your needle all the way through. There you go. I've just done those bugles there, you can see, so they're just so fun, they're so nice to touch, and they're really, really fun to do and just look really cool. You can do them in clusters, in lines, however you fancy really. So that's those. And then now I'm going to show you probably the best part, I think, of 3D beading. These here, so I call them beaded dribbles. So they just kind of explode out of the hoop and they just fall everywhere and anywhere. They give the piece real movement and make it kind of really come alive. So I will show you how to do those. So I've just got out a smaller bead and then a bigger bead. You can work with whichever ones you fancy, but this generally, as a rule of thumb, works quite well, a smaller bead with a bigger bead. But have a play, you can do them all the same size, whatever you fancy. So the smaller beads will be the main body of the dribble, and then this orange one is going to go on the end of that dribble, just like that. So I will show you that now. So I would slide on, I vary all the lengths of mine, so they're never all the same size, because I think it just makes it look more organic. So let's slide on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I've slid on 10 beads onto my needle. Then I'm going to grab, oh, one came off, grab an orange, slide that onto the end, and then I'm going to grab another turquoise and pop that on the end, and then push them all the way down to the bottom of that thread. And with my needle, I'm going to take up that top turquoise one, push him away, and then I'm going to go back through all the other beads. So this can take a bit of practice just to get used to going through all the beads, and then pull your needle all the way through and your thread. And then you've got a little standing up dribble just there. So I show you that again. So pop your needle through the fabric, and then this time I think I'm going to do 8. 3, 8, and then a big orange one, and then a little turquoise one. So again, like that, slide them all the way down to the bottom, hold on to that turquoise one, go back through the orange and the rest of your beads, and make sure you do go through all the beads. It's very easy to miss some, so just check before you go through with your needle, and then secure that on like so. Just threaded up my needle with some of the chunky thread, so now I'm going to show you some of the stitches. So in my hoops I work with the chunky thread and then an embroidery thread as well, and I work with seed stitch, a double seed stitch, and then also French knots in there too, so just add a really nice bit of texture, the French knots, just different relief to the beads. So yeah, I will show you how to do those. So first of all, I'll show you just a little seed stitch. So if you just come up in your fabric wherever you like, no need to do a double stitch here because we've got our chunky thread and this will stay anchored on. Same with the embroidery thread, just do that double knot on the end and all will be fine. And I'm just going to do a little stitch, probably about 3mm or so long, put my needle back through, just like that, and then another one coming up in a slightly different place, and then I'm going to change the direction of it and just keep going with that. So you kind of create a little cluster of stitches that are all going in different directions, just like so. The needle can be a bit tough to get through the linen, but just keep giving it a wiggle and it will come through. And then be careful not to tangle it on your beading. And there you go, so you got some stitches in there. So I'm just going to keep going and do a little cluster there to show you. Okay, so that is the seed stitch just there with the chunky thread, and now I'm going to show you a double seed stitch. So I've got it on this cream hoop, but it is quite hard to see because it's all in cream. So it's this stitch here, which is just, you can see it's like 2 little seed stitches together. So I'll show you that on here in a turquoise so you can really see what's going on. So it is very, very similar to what we just did. A little stitch about 3mm or so, and then one exactly the same next to it, just like that. So it's just kind of like 2 little bars, and then I just alternate their directions and have a play with those at laying them out. They just are quite neat, look quite fresh, give a bit of texture, but not too much against the beading. It's quite nice adding the stitches in next to some quite heavy or quite 3D beading, so it kind of really lets you appreciate that texture. I'm going to show you French knots. I'm going to jump to my chunky thread again because it's just going to be way easier to show you. So we'll come up next to the sequin here, pull that thread through. So again, compared to the embroidery thread, it is much chunkier and harder to get through the fabric, but just give it a tug and it will. So French knots, take the thread coming out of the fabric in your left hand. I pinch it between my thumb and forefinger, just there, and then I take my needle and I push it underneath the thread, just like that. Then I wrap the thread around once and twice. The more wraps you do, the fatter your knot. And then you want to take the needle and push that thread underneath, so you kind of got all those wraps around that needle. And then I'm going to take my needle and push it into the fabric, not in the same hole because that will cause problems, but about 1 millimeter or so just next to where you came up. Hold on to the thread in your left hand just to keep that tension, and then you want to pull the needle all the way through, and your thread too as well, and then you've got a nice little knot just there on the top of your fabric. If you work in a cluster, they look really, really lovely. So again, left hand with the thread, right hand with the needle, 1, 2, and then put your needle back down about 1 millimeter or so next to where you came up. Keep that tension on the left hand, and then pull that through just like so. These can be quite tricky, and I just recommend practicing. So just keep going. If it goes wrong, undo it. That's the beauty of embroidery. Nothing is set in stone. But just keep going with them because it's all about getting that tension correct in this left hand. That will really, really help you. So there you go. That is kind of a little tour and tips video on how to do all these techniques that I use in my embroideries. But of course, the kits have been designed not to be as such a stitch by numbers kind of thing, but just as a, you have everything in the kit and then you can have a play and an experiment. So yes, of course, if you do want to stitch a hoop like this, please do. You've got all the tips here and all the techniques, so you can carry on and just grow your hoop and fill it all out. Keep adding different heights in different places. I try to not do the same technique next to each other, just to keep it that organic feel, and just kind of, yeah, keep going with the piece to hopefully end up with something like that at the end. But equally, if you don't want to do something like how I've done, you can do something totally different. So this hoop here is in lines, so it's all kind of linear. It's kind of almost like a sampler piece. So the top row, I just laid down all the beads, then I've done French knots one by one, then I've done bugle bead, laying down flat, then I've got a bead on top of a bead, running stitch, and then this one here I've just folded the sequins. So just like with these sequins, these turquoise sequins, if you just simply fold them in half, just push your nail in the middle, you can fold the sequin in half like that, and then you can put a bead in the middle, and that adds a really nice texture and something a bit different. So that's that. These are bugles on their end, one by one. Again, a bead, then you've got a little tiny seed stitch all in a row. It's sequins and beads alternating, so that's a really long sequin caterpillar. And then these are the beaded dribbles, but just all exactly the same size and spaced out evenly in a line like that. So there's lots of possibilities of the kit, as well as if you like your florals, you can have a go at a kind of floral hoop as well. So this one, I've just kind of worked with the beads and forming them as petals, putting the bugles in the middle, laying the bugles down as petals, working with the stitch work, folding the sequins to create the petals, putting things in different places, and just kind of having a real experiment with it. Beaded dribbles in the centre of the flower, petals around the edge and the beads. So you just have a real play with the kit. You've got everything here to have a play and create whatever you fancy, and I hope you love your kit. Thank you for watching.